speed down, 2.5. Picking up some dust. City speed, 2.5 down. Contact light. Okay, engine stop. ACA at a descent. Mode control, both auto, descent, engine command override off.
We copy you down, Eagle.
Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Man landing on the moon. The culmination of decades of adventure in the sky. It was an adventure that I'd watched with boyish enthusiasm that had lasted a lifetime. I had my first airplane ride when I was 6 in an open cockpit biplane. In World War II, as a correspondent, I rode some of our hottest bombers in combat. It was during the war that I saw man's first steps towards space travel. The Nazis had developed a machine they called the V-2, the first long-range rocket bomb. It climbed to extreme high altitudes and then, faster than the speed of sound, plunged down on unsuspecting, unwarned targets. From the moment I saw those first rockets, I was hooked on space. When I returned from Europe after the war and got into the television business, it turned out that rockets were going to be one of the first stories I'd be covering.
It is as difficult to hit the moon with a rocket, scientists have said, as it would be to shoot a fly from 6 miles off with a small caliber rifle and to hit the fly in the eye. But Target Moon can be hit, and it has been hit. And the day cannot be far off now when some space-soaring Earthman, as he peers out from his arching missile, stares in awe at his looming destination, the moon.
It turned out I wasn't the only one interested in rockets. By the 50s, the United States and the Soviet Union began vying for supremacy in space. That turned out to be a major battleground in a half-century of Cold War. Our space program had more than a little trouble getting off the ground. I imagine we all thought this was a necessary warm-up phase until the Soviets started the clock.
Today, a new moon is in the sky, a 23-inch metal sphere placed in orbit by a Russian rocket. You are hearing the actual signals transmitted by the Earth-circling satellite, one of the great scientific feats of the age.
The world was stunned. It became clear that the Cold War playing field now included space. The United States prepared for war. The Soviet Union celebrated. In this climate, we at CBS did a special, Where We Stand.
This is the age of the rocket, which travels out, the satellite which surrounds all of us, and the missile which could destroy us. In the competition for leadership in space, in the race run by rocket, where is the finish line? Do we end up in a nuclear war, or do we try to live with the constant fear of one? Sputnik was a serious threat, if not to our immediate security, then to our sense of security. The race for control of the moon's surface, here's where we stand. Here's our first space vehicle, still on the ground.
The United States did launch a satellite like the one that I was holding, but
America's first attempt to launch a satellite, a 6.5-inch sphere weighing just over 3 pounds, was checked out by scientists and declared ready. What happened is already unhappy history. Another setback for the United States in the race into outer space.
that failure put America on edge. A tabloid newspaper called our satellite Kaputnik. But by the spring of 1959, we seemed to be catching up. We'd selected our first 7 astronauts, the Mercury 7. And that sort of gave us a sense that we really were on the way to challenge the Soviets. Well, we at CBS covered all the drills and the simulations that the astronauts were going through. The whole country was fascinated. The big question became then, which one of those 7 men would be the first American into space?
And the honor goes to an astro chimp who was nicknamed Ham. A friendly little fellow in a form-fitted couch about to make his mark in history.
Ham had always been this nice, docile chimp. He'd become NASA's unofficial mascot. Everybody adored Ham. But when he returned from space, that boy was clearly peeved. He'd become real pals with his trainer. But Ham took a good nip at him when he tried to lift him from the capsule after that flight. Ham clearly wasn't exactly sold on space travel. I actually saw Ham a few years back. Once he was retired from NASA, and he'd settled in North Carolina's Zoological Park, probably because it was near a golf course. He looked like a real crotchety old man at the time. I don't think he ever got over that space flight. Before we got an American human into space, the Soviets scooped us again. I'd traveled halfway around the world to Israel to cover the trial of Adolf Eichmann, the Nazi war criminal.
Entering the bulletproof prisoner's box is the man charged with the annihilation of millions of Jews in Nazi death camps.
After covering the opening of the trial, Sandy Sokolow, the producer, and I left Jerusalem to hand carry that film back to New York. Those were the days before satellites. Because of the time difference, we still planned to get back in time for our show that night. And we sat on the plane, the two of us, typing furiously, getting the script ready. When our plane stopped in Rome, we got off to stretch our legs, and here were the Rome newspapers with the big headlines. And you didn't have to speak Italian to know what they said. First man into space. Yuri Gagarin, a Russian, had made the first manned space flight. Well, immediately I called New York to say that we assumed that our show was dead. And they said, absolutely, Gagarin's a show. Get on back here and we'll have the script ready. Well, we got on the plane, we tore up our scripts, and we folded our typewriters. Our Eichmann footage was never used. That night, a Soviet victory topped the news. Our facilities for covering those early space flights out at Cape Canaveral, well, they're about as primitive as the rockets themselves, maybe more so. We were out in the boondocks with the mosquitoes and the snakes, a mile from the launch site, marshy area. Our studio, well, I'll call it a studio, was actually the back of a station wagon. Even when we got into a real studio, we had our problems.
We have just had, I've been advised, some film in from the Defense Department, the first official film of the preparations of the Explorer, and here it is. This is the Explorer as it is being moved to the gantry Unfortunately, however, the film seems to be upside down. If we can get it right side up in time, we'll take a look at it for you. There's our film now of the preparations right side up. Fortunately, the Explorer went up right side up, and we're going to see it that way.
The space program was doing just a little better than we were. By 1961, the United States was ready to shoot a man into space, less than a month after the Soviet success.
The time here at Cape Canaveral, 9:31. The Redstone rocket is ready. The Mercury capsule is ready. Commander Alan Shepard, our astronaut, is ready. The weather is good. It is 2 minutes and counting, 120 seconds left before this blast-off.
I worried a lot about that flight. We've been watching those rockets, test flights, blow up, go off course one by one. But then Gagarin's flight, of course, put all the pressure on the United States to get a man up there. And that day, there was great excitement and considerable concern that we might have rushed it a little bit.
There's T-minus 1 minute, and that process has now begun.
I once asked one of the astronauts, by the way, what he was thinking about just before liftoff. And he said, well, you know, I looked at all those dials and those buttons and those things to press, and I thought to myself, my gosh, this machine was built by the lowest bidder.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition, liftoff, and it's 30 minutes after the hour.
An important aspect of that flight, by the way, was that we showed it all on live television. The Russian launches had always taken place in secret, of course.
Freedom 7 is still go. The trajectory is A-OK.
There is high drama in the risks a man is asked to take to ride a rocket into space. There's high drama, too, in the risks a free nation is asked to take to publicize that effort. Today, America took the gamble, and America won. A failure would have been a major Cold War defeat. A victory in the full glare of publicity was a free world victory. And so public was our effort today that the world can have no doubts that we did it. And the man who did it was Alan Shepard, Jr. History was made today, and you were an eyewitness.
We were back in the race, but Shepard had only flown 100-some miles into space. Gagarin had actually circled the Earth. America had a way to go, but if there was any doubt as to our goal, President Kennedy put that into focus just weeks after Shepard's flight.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
Well, it was less than a year after Kennedy's pledge that we shot a man into space to circle the globe.
Launch countdown is at 2 minutes and 30 seconds and counting. 2 minutes and 30 seconds and counting. This is Mercury Control.
I don't know any words for this except the trite ones. Tension is mounting here at Cape Canaveral. We've heard that phrase so many times before, but I don't know any circumstance to which it applies quite like this.
Godspeed, John Glenn. 10, 9, 8, 7. Roger, the clock is operating. We're underway.
Looks like a good flight. Oh, go, baby.
Well, John Glenn returned like a war hero, and Space travel became a national obsession. And I wasn't any exception to that. I begged NASA until they finally gave up and let me try a lot of those simulators on which the astronauts were training. Great fun. But memorable was a ride in a large jet they'd stripped of its seats.
This is Walter Cronkite reporting from the cabin of a C-131 over Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Dayton, Ohio. This aircraft is executing a maneuver to make it and everyone in it temporarily weightless.
I was strapped in, well, but the sensation, I can tell you, was still just a little uncomfortable. The astronauts started calling that plane, just a little indelicate, but the vomit comet.
This weightless condition is one of many that man must learn to tolerate or overcome to survive a first trip to the moon. What are the hazards and what are our scientists doing to ensure man's survival in the hostile environment of outer space?
In that never-ending journalistic pursuit of information, I began walking on walls.
Once we get you in it, it's like laying down in bed.
Well, if it's like walking on the moon, it's not bad. What happens if I fall over on my face? Am I going?
Nothing at all. Very simple, very soft, slow motion, in fact. Just,
so I fall over on my face to see?
Right. Just let yourself fall.
Really?
Right.
Okay. Here I go. Oh, nothing to it.
Nothing at all. Just push yourself right back up.
My golly. Say, that's the way to do the push-ups in the morning.
Why don't you try jumping a little bit? You can, we've jumped up to about 14 feet.
Who can?
Oh, I have.
Well, that's another thing. You've been practicing. Well, the astronauts won't be doing any leaping around like this, though, will they?
I was strolling on the moon one day.
Well, I wasn't quite right about that speculation.
December, May to May, that's right.
I ended up being identified with the space program. Even third grader Mary McCarter caught the idea that I'd been to the moon. Some critics suggested that I had lost my objectivity, that I'd become a NASA booster. Wrong. I reported fully on those things that I thought weren't right at NASA. Misguided strategies, sloppy workmanship, political manipulations. NASA didn't give me any medals for my coverage. But for heaven's sakes, how in the world could anyone not be excited about such a great adventure? The assault on that great unexplored frontier. In the early 60s, orbital flights and rocket tests brought renewed faith that we were going to reach the moon by the end of the decade. We knew the rockets were getting bigger, but I don't think any of us were prepared for the Saturn. A huge beast of a thing. All the networks built broadcast booths for the launch. At CBS, we had a place with a big glass front.
9. Ignition sequence starts. 5, 4, we have ignition.
This first great unmanned Saturn went up.
We have liftoff.
Well, I tell you, there was an earthquake. The Earth actually shook.
The tower has...
our building's shaking here. Our building's shaking. Oh, it's terrific. The building's shaking.
The tiles in the roof began shaking loose.
This big glass window is shaking. We're holding it with our hands.
I put my hand on the window to hold that glass in place.
Part of our roof has come in here.
And it was only afterwards that the glass people came rushing in. They said, "Don't ever do that again. The glass is made to vibrate. If you stop the vibration, it'll break for sure."
Good morning, and it's windy, quite gusty.
For all of these flights, we stayed on the air for hours at a time. That's one reason I got my nickname, Iron Pants, I think. Well, one day I took the occasion of a long period of commercials to take a rest stop. That's why they have commercials, I think. Anyway, they'd erected at one end of the broadcast row a toilet area, and I went there and I used one of the booths. When I got ready to leave, the door jammed. I couldn't get out. With the door being tricky like that, I just barely got back on the air in time. Well, later I got to thinking about it, and I had our art department make up a sign, and it said, "Private, David Brinkley." And I sent them down to hang it on the door. You see, I kind of hoped that Brinkley would go down there and he'd figure that booth was for him and he'd use it and he'd get locked in. And I thought we'd get rid of our competition that way. It didn't work. We actually had a lot of fun covering the space story in those days. It was easy to forget how dangerous those missions really were. Of course, we were reminded, tragically, in late January 1967, when a routine test on the launch pad turned, well, tragic. A spark ignited the pure oxygen in the first Apollo spaceship. Astronauts Ed White, Roger Chaffee, and Gus Grissom died in that flash fire. It was an awful blow. The public and perhaps NASA itself had become a little complacent after 16 successful flights and no accidents. Now there was new realization that this was a mighty dangerous game after all. I was asked frequently if I thought the astronauts were heroes. Well, heroism's rather hard to define, but I suppose I did. They, of course, denied they were heroes. Just test pilots doing our job, they'd tell you. Well, test pilots they'd been, certainly, but they were pushing the known limits of man and machine in a very hostile environment of space. And they were putting their lives on the line to do it. I'd call that heroism. Correcting the problems that led to the fire put NASA behind, of course, but less than 2 years after the tragedy, they were ready for the first flight to the moon.
This is a CBS News special report, Man at the Moon. The flight of Apollo 8.
6.5 years ago, John F. Kennedy set this nation on a course toward the moon. This morning, 3 Americans, Frank Borman, Jim Lovell, and William Anders, are on the verge of making man's first journey to the moon.
Apollo 8 would not land on the moon, but it would give us detailed pictures of the lunar surface. It would be the first time man had looked at the back side of the moon, and it would prepare for the landing on the moon later on. It would also give us the first live look at our planet Earth from afar, and that was something.
All right, you're looking at yourselves as seen from 180,000 miles out in space.
On Christmas Eve, there came from Apollo 8, orbiting the moon, this message.
In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And from the crew of Apollo 8, we close with good night, good luck, a Merry Christmas, and God bless all of you on the good earth.
With the return of the astronauts, we all began to believe that the moon actually might be within our grasp. The whole thing was a great triumph, and not just for Americans. You have to remember, at that time, we were entrenched in that devastating war against the North Vietnamese. But even that didn't keep their leader, Ho Chi Minh, from acknowledging the greatness of the accomplishment.
The last thing I did before I left office was to write to 186 leaders of foreign governments and send them a picture taken by Apollo 8 of the Earth. And the response that I got to that letter and that picture is truly amazing. Even in May, after I'd returned here to the ranch and got my mail out of Johnson City, there came a letter from Ho Chi Minh.
From Ho Chi Minh?
Ho Chi Minh thanking me for sending him this picture and expressing his appreciation for this act. I think the appreciation of our space effort is universal.
It seems that throughout history, even during the devastation of war, humans celebrate the glory of exploration.
All indications coming in to the control center at this time indicate we are go on the Apollo mission, the flight to land the first men on the moon. Guidance system goes on internal at 17 seconds, leading up to the ignition sequence at 8.9 seconds. We're approaching the 60-second mark on the Apollo 11 mission. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10. Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo
11. Oh boy, it looks good, Wally.
Somebody must be leaving town.
Building shaking. We're getting that buffeting we've become used to. What a moment. Man on the way to the moon. After more than 4 days in flight getting out to the moon, Apollo 11 was ready for the moon landing. The little spaceship that it carried that was to land on the moon had never, of course, been tested in the weightless environment. Nobody knew whether it was going to work. This was really the moment of truth.
Manual attitude control is good. We're go. Same time. We're go. 2,000 feet. 2,000 feet. Into the ag. 47 degrees. Roger.
We at CBS had cameras all over the world waiting to record people's reaction to the success or that possible failure of the mission.
About 1,200 feet per second. You're looking great.
Disneyland in California.
Small television sets are now becoming commonplace at bases in Vietnam, no matter how remote, and the GIs have been following Apollo just as they would in the United States.
At 2:47 in the afternoon, Mr. Pease Ellington had decided to spend the rest of his day watching Walter Cronkite.
People from all walks of life, all corners of the world, had come together to watch that historic moment.
There was much to thank God for, and I prayed for the men going to the moon too.
Now, we didn't have any images of this part of the flight, that is, the actual landing of the LEM. So, with NASA's help, our CBS animators very cleverly had created a whole film that showed second by second exactly what was happening in that lunar module as it touched down. At the precise moment, as the module approached the moon, we began running that animation. We knew that the final thing that was going to happen would be that this green light by the door would go on, indicating touchdown. It was just one little problem we had there. Neither the NASA engineers who helped us with that animation, nor anybody else at NASA, including the astronauts on the way down to the moon, had expected that cloud of dust that their rockets raised. They knew there were going to be some, but not so much that they really couldn't see through it. It was really a life-threatening matter in the module. Armstrong couldn't see where he was going, but he had to do some maneuvering. With that landing fuel almost gone, he made that command decision. He just had to move sideways to get out of the dust storm. Well, our animation you see, was still running while he was making that decision, spending a few extra seconds to move the LEM. Well, suddenly the arrival lights go on in our animated module. The LEM is down, according to CBS. Millions of people, I suppose, around the world now are cheering the successful landing of the LEM. But that was our animation. Actually, on the moon, Armstrong's still 50 feet up, and he's in big trouble. It took him 40 more seconds with his fuel running out to get down on the surface. And most of us, well, we choose not to remember how CBS News landed on the moon nearly 40 seconds before Neil Armstrong.
Down 2.5. Forward. Forward. Good. 40 feet down, 2.5. Picking up some dust. 30 feet, 2.5 down. Straight shadow. 4 forward. 4 forward. Drift into the right a little. 20. Down 1/2. 30 seconds forward. Just. Good. Okay. Contact light. Okay, engine stop. ACA at a descent. Mode control both auto, descent engine command override off. Engine arm off.
We're home.
413 is in.
Man on the moon.
We copy you down, Eagle. Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
I'd had as long as NASA to prepare for that landing, and I'd thought of a lot of fine words that I could say, appropriate for the momentous nature of this occasion itself, words that would live in history. And then the landing took place, and what did this great CBS commentator say?
What?
Okay, we're going to be busy for a minute.
I was speechless. I was speechless, and again, it's one of those events that maybe I'd like to play it differently, but I'm not so sure I would. It was that kind of a moment, a speechless moment for all mankind. The astronaut's journey, of course, was not over. What would happen when man opened that door, stepped down, and actually stood on the surface of the moon?
Okay, Houston, I'm on the porch. Roger, Neil. Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now. I'm going to step off the limb. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Armstrong is on the moon, 38-year-old American, standing on the surface of the moon on this July 20th, 1969. You know, I always dreamed one day that I'd have a chance to go to the moon. And I thought I was getting pretty close at one point. In the 80s, NASA finally agreed that it should let a journalist go into space. And I was led to believe by quite a few NASA executives that they thought that my chances of going were pretty good. But there was a huge elimination process that I was going to have to survive to make it. There were hundreds of applications, thousands actually. I made the first cut down to 100, and then I made the second cut down to 40, I think it was. But NASA, under some political pressure from Washington, decided that a teacher would be the first private civilian to go into space, and we as journalists were put on hold. Well, the teacher was Krista McAuliffe, and she was doomed to die in that Challenger disaster. The Journalist in Space program was canceled. I'm probably not that different from most reporters, I guess. Strongly competitive, driven to find that next scoop out there. The big story is always the one that's just a little bit out of reach. For me, that always was the moon. I always wanted to get all the way out there, all the way out to the moon, to get a chance to look from that great distance at this beautiful but this lonely planet of ours. That would have been an experience. I guess until I have the wings of an angel, to which I clearly am entitled, I won't experience that weightlessness of space. You know, when you look back at the 15th century, what do you remember? Out of all of the things that happened during that century, we only remember one event, 1492, Columbus landing in America, discovering the New World. When the history books or the computer programs or whatever they have then are written 500 years from now, with all the scientific achievements of this century, with all the wars and the political developments, the one accomplishment that's going to lead all the rest will be man's landing on the moon, the escape from his own environment to another world.